My father one time, a few years ago, he wrote me a letter and he said, I would like, in one way or another, he said, you know, if it wasn't for, you know, living in an oppressed town, you know, you wouldn't have had the incentive to really go out and prove something to anyone. And he likes to take credit for that, for bringing me in, you know, bringing me up in a small town. But no, I'm sure I would have looked for punk rock, and it just would have been easier for me, and I would have gotten into it at an earlier age, you know. And I just would have, you know, I mean, I just think there's a breed of people who really honestly like music, and there aren't very many of them, really. You know, and those are the people who usually become musicians, you know. And it doesn't really matter what environment you grow up in, you know. It's just, you know, some environments are more restrictive than others.
You hear it eventually anyway, I guess, yeah. So it was, I guess it was Buzz that you heard for the first time, right? Or was it before that? Had you any exposure to it before that?
No, that was about the time. Yeah, he made a compilation tape for me. I was commuting back and forth between Aberdeen and Montesano. I was living in Aberdeen, and I was going to school in Montesano, which is about 30 miles away. And I had Buzz in a couple of classes. I had him in an art class and an electronics class, and I remember just hanging out with him, and just he had a few punk rock magazines, and I would look at them and just like, oh, I was just mesmerized, you know. I was just like, oh God, what would that sound like? And finally one day I convinced him to make me a tape.
So you were a long time wondering about what it would be like before you actually heard it then?
Oh, for years, ever since I was like 12, like that issue of Cream magazine when they were following the Sex Pistols tour, you know, in '78, you know. I remember seeing that picture of Sid Vicious and just going, oh wow, that's real rock and roll. It has to be. Look at the blood on his face, you know.